Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we are back in the desolate, cursy land of Jujutsu Kaisen in order to examine a certain Yuji Itadori, a man-boy who has become one of the more intriguing shonen protagonists in recent times, and there's a lot to know about him that is not necessarily conveyed through the series itself. So our purpose here today is to present 10 glorious Itadori-related fun facts that you did not know, and if you did, I don't care, because they're still gonna be fun. I also want to point out at the beginning of this video that this is not going to be some sort of clickbaity, CBR style list. I mean, for example, in their article of the top 10 things that you did not know about Yuji, they featured number 10, he's strong, number 4, he's smart, and number 2, he's popular. So we won't be doing any of that garbage here, and honestly, that writer should be ashamed. But for you to avoid the curse of shame, make sure to subscribe to the New World Review, which will result in consistent injections of Jujutsu Kaisen culture administered straight into your YouTube feed. So let's actually begin with a rather substantive thing at number 10 about Yuji, which is that Gege Akutami actually has quite a bit of trouble writing him. This was revealed in Yuji's Q&A section in the Jujutsu Kaisen fanbook, and Akutami themselves has claimed that they aren't quite sure why Yuji is a bit of a struggle. However, Akutami is committed to figuring this out and to stop, quote, being bad with Yuji's character, which I would say is a very classic Akutami apology statement. At this point, I have read a ton of interviews with Akutami, and they have a particularly humble mindset when it comes to their work, always concerned that something isn't good enough, and even apologizing when they were forced to take a hiatus for health reasons. In any case, I can also see where Akutami is coming from, because many main protagonists are quite difficult, especially with what's been set up in Jujutsu Kaisen. And there's even been some evidence to suggest that Akutami didn't put an extensive amount of thought into Yuji when creating him, as when asked about his previous renown as the Tiger of West Junior High, Akutami admitted that they didn't consider why that epithet was given. But in the end, Yuji is the primary anchor of the series, and as an author, I imagine that's why Akutami is so hyper-focused and harsh on themselves when it comes to Yuji specifically. Although I should say that I, for one, think he's pretty damn compelling. This does take us to Yuji fun fact number 2, however, and anime watchers may be somewhat shocked to learn this, but Yuji was not the original protagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen. In fact, in a rather trippy sentence, Jujutsu Kaisen itself is not even the original Jujutsu Kaisen. The series itself actually began as a 4-chapter mini-manga, which was helmed by protagonist Yuta Okotsu. And Yuta and Yuji, well, they're very similar in many ways, specifically narratively, because they both commence the series scheduled to be executed, and there's a lot of similarities. So this may even explain some of Akutami's trouble with Yuji, because Yuta had a very compelling story which will be explored in the upcoming Jujutsu Kaisen film, and when starting the sequel series, Yuji was created to fill that Yuta role, just with a bunch of different circumstances. And because Yuta does exist in Jujutsu Kaisen, Akutami obviously couldn't just copy and paste too much of Yuta onto Yuji, so it does lead to a potentially awkward situation where we need to hit those same story and character beats, just in a slightly different way. And all of which is to say that if you have not checked out the Jujutsu Kaisen prequel, then absolutely go and do it, or I guess wait for the film, it's coming out soon enough. Either way, it's a fascinating insight into what we're reading and watching today. As for Yuji though, let's get etymological with fun fact number 3. Yuji's name was designed by Akutami to sound as plain, normal, and realistic as possible, which might be difficult for English-speaking audiences to comprehend because every Japanese name sounds totally sugoi desu and magical to us. So when their equivalent of a John Smith comes around, we're just sitting here going, oh my god, that is the greatest and most unique name ever. So there's some insight into what Yuji Itadori is meant to sound like, but we also know where Akutami sourced these elements. The Yuji part comes from one of Akutami's old classmates, and it is written with the kanji Yu, which is read as slow and relaxing, as well as Ji, which means caring for others. Meanwhile, his surname Itadori comes directly from the Itadori plant, which has often been used as a herbal remedy, so very appropriate for someone like Yuji whose aspirations in life are to save others. However, the Itadori kanji combination has a very cool and rare reading as well, because the first character Ita is more commonly read as Tora, which means tiger, thus giving us some decent insight into why he was nicknamed the Tiger of West Junior High. But all in all, even with the appropriate subtle meanings, Yuji Itadori is designed to be a fairly plain and unassuming name. For someone less plain and not at all unassuming, let's now talk about Jennifer Lawrence. Yuji famously states that his preferred type of woman in the series are those who are tall and have big butts, someone like, for example, Jennifer Lawrence. Although in the Jujutsu Kaisen fanbook, this is even taken a step further by having Yuji's type listed as simply Jennifer Lawrence. But while Yuji's obsession here may be a mystery in the series, Akutami has revealed where all of this began, and apparently it was when Yuji watched the film Silver Linings Playbook, for which Jennifer Lawrence received an Academy Award for Best Actress. And ever since then, Yuji has been something of a big fan of her, to say the least. Although the designation of his type has led to a fair bit of fun in the Jujutsu Kaisen fanbase, and in fact Yuji's English dub voice actor even comedically redid the famous line, but substituting in Megan Thee Stallion, thus leading leading to many a Megan meme. But while his preference in women may be very, very clear, Yuji's taste in food is anything but. His favorite food has been identified as quote-unquote rice bowl with food on top, so food with more food, and his least favorite food has been registered as none. So this man will quite literally eat anything, I suppose, which, it actually makes a lot of sense. Hence why he is so eager to devour all of those tasty Sukuna fingies. It is a bit unusual for a shonen protagonist though, because even the big tropey eaters usually have something that puts them off. Like for Luffy, that's cherry pie, for Naruto, that's fresh vegetables, but for Yuji, nothing is off the table, which means that he really does put the eat in Itadori. Oh, and also it leads nicely into our next fun fact, because Gege Akutami was posed the question of what would happen if Yuji consumed one of the death paintings, which just as a TLDR recap, they are cursed womb existences that can evolve into half human, half cursed spirits when implanted into a human vessel. However, that idea becomes a bit tricky when it comes to Yuji because he already shares his fleshy vessel with the king of curses, Ryomen Sukuna. So while this is definitely a more academic exercise, the question of what would happen if Yuji consumed a death painting does still exist, especially considering how eager he seems to be to consume anything and everything. And according to Akutami, should this event occur, then the death painting existence would simply be destroyed by Sukuna. However, another scenario was given to us as well, which is what would happen if Yuji ate a death painting prior to consuming Sukuna's finger. And this is very interesting because apparently the death painting would not be able to evolve itself into a hybrid with Yuji's body, and instead it would be consumed and Yuji would inherit its cursed energy. So either way, it's a pretty bad outcome for the hypothetical painting in question, although it does further reinforce Yuji's absurd ability to curses. And according to fun fact number 7, Yuji may also have some other useful natural resistances because apparently his body fat percentage is within single-digit numbers. Now this is particularly intriguing because the average male body fat percentage would be between 18 to 24, and we don't even reach the single-digit numbers until we hit the realm of athletes who average between 6 to 13%. So Yuji's general fitness is certainly on par with the greatest of physical specimens that this world has to offer, despite the fact that he will, as established, eat pretty much anything. It's quite envious really, because Yuji doesn't seem to pay too much attention to any kind of dieting. He just eats what he wants, in reasonable portions, I suppose, and is granted the form of an Adonis as a reward for his doing nothing. However, there may also be a logical in-world explanation for this due to the concept of heavenly restrictions. Previous restriction users that we've seen, such as Maki and Toji Zenin, have had documented cases of physical strength being heavily buffed in exchange for less or even no control of cursed energy. And Yuji could be in a very similar situation because right now, I see no other explanation for his insane abilities, but particularly his power to maintain single-digit body fat with his, whatever his lifestyle is. But as part of this lifestyle, Yuji has also been documented as being the best cook amongst the first-year Jujutsu students, although I'm not quite sure how much that means because there's only 3 of them, and the other 2 happen to be Megumi Fushiguro and Nobara Kugisaki, 2 characters who I would never think to award praise in the culinary field. But I suppose it does make sense. Yuji does have the shonen protagonist syndrome whereby his parents were never around, and even though he was raised by his grandfather, that would quickly have turned into Yuji needing to learn quite a few basics about life just in order to help out, which of course includes cooking. And just in case you were curious, when it comes to the second best cook amongst the first year students, Akutami claims that it's a bit of a sad tie. Neither Fushiguro nor Kugisaki have any skill relevant enough to be separated from one another, so all hail Yuji, I guess. And speaking of hailing Yuji, we should all take a moment to recognize that he is currently one of the dual world record holders for the most consecutive number of Black Flash attacks performed, which is pretty astounding for someone who had only been using cursed energy for, a handful of months before performing this feat. Still, the explanation for that is pretty simple according to fellow world record holder Kento Nanami, who states that after the first Black Flash, the performer enters the zone, and thus making subsequent Black Flashes theoretically easier to produce, rather than pulling one out of nowhere like the initial instance. But to date, Yuji and Nanami have performed the technique 4 times in a row each, and this record does get a little bit confusing, because a lot of fans forget that it was talking about performing the attack consecutively, which Yuji did 4 times against Hanami. However, he did also perform a 5th, or I guess first, Black Flash earlier on in the fight, which often leads people to believe that he actually broke the record. Sadly, however, that first Black Flash is invalid because there were many other attacks that came in between that and the consecutive 4. But still, Yuji, the dude, performed 5 Black Flashes in a single day, and that feels pretty damn impressive. But quite possibly the most intriguing and also kind of concerning fact about Yuji is that Gege Akutami still has not decided what his ultimate fate will be. At this point in the Jujutsu Kaisen manga, we are stated to be about halfway through, and that Akutami has quite a clear roadmap to the end of the series. For example, characters like Fushiguro have their story set in stone, but that that is not the case for Yuji, and this may once again have to do with the difficulties Akutami has with writing the character. But I find it quite interesting that there is a legitimate question mark as to his ultimate fate, because in my mind there are only two basic options, one being that Yuji lives and the other being that Yuji dies. And I don't want to make myself sound too bloodthirsty here, but I am very much in the camp of the latter. I very much like the idea that Jujutsu Kaisen was set up to arrive at the inevitable conclusion of Yuji's death, whether that be via execution, sacrificing himself to rid the world of Sukuna, or even potentially another way, it doesn't matter, so long as it satisfies his grandfather's last words of making sure not to die alone. And I think that a series like Jujutsu Kaisen could actually pull off killing its protagonist in a way that many others could not. Akutami has never been shy of exploring dark, or not even dark, but just like somber and depressing ideas in the series, stuff that really hits you in the emotional testicles. And at this point I feel like Yuji living and having a happy ending would kind of betray everything that we've been working up towards until now. However, with that said, I am not a world-class manga author. I am a random Australian dude guy, and I very much trust Akutami's intuition when it comes to storytelling. Thinking about it, I have very few criticisms of Jujutsu Kaisen in that regard. It's almost unbelievable, really, because I tend to rip other series apart like brittle paper. But Jujutsu Kaisen it's just really solid. So if Akutami has an ending in mind where Yuji does live, then yeah, maybe that's the right way to go. I just can't quite see it myself at the moment, and I guess to be fair, even Akutami themselves is struggling with landing on that final choice. So for an easy choice to make, here's another video to watch. I promise it'll be great fun just like this one, so I look forward to seeing you there.